I call the member for Swan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's always a pleasure of mine to support a bill such as this put by the member of Flinders, and also to support the workers in my electorate of Swan, where the Rheem factory is. We just heard the Parliamentary Secretary, the member for Isaacs, talking on the bill as well, and it's good, encouraging to see someone who talks about raising the standards of Parliament spent the first 2.5 minutes with his invective and diatribe and insults at the member for Flinders and also at the opposition. And the contradictory I see in his speech, he talks about the policies of that we have no policies in our direct action policy is incorrect, but then he goes on to quote the member for Wentworth's policies and laud it. And then it just amazes me that such a contradiction, and I wonder why people refer to him as Rumpole. Now I know why. Yeah, that's all right. Keep it coming. I'm happy to relay back everything you say to the workers in the Rheem factories, particularly in my electorate. Then we get him calling this a stunt. So again, I'll relay that back to the workers in the factory that you think this is a stunt, that their jobs are a stunt, their jobs are worth nothing. He talks about deceiving and manufacturing. He talks about crocodile tears and tawdry clowns. I mean, he talks also, how does he, as a parliamentary secretary, bring that level of insults down into this place? You know, I thank the member for Flinders for his contribution, and I know that he understands how important this bill is to my electorate, as he joined me on a factory floor visit to the Rheem factory in Welshpool in my electorate of Swan on the 7th of March, to meet some of the hundreds of employees whose jobs have been threatened by this government's actions. It was at this visit that we announced that we would be drawing up this bill, and while we in Coalition wanted to debate it before the budget, a move which was blocked by this government, in standing here and debating this bill today, we are keeping the promise made on the 7th of March to the workers on the factory floor in Welshpool to bring this bill to the Parliament. This stands in contrast to the Labor government, whose broken promise on the solar hot water has led us to this point today. It has led to the Coalition introducing a bill that simply requires the government to stick to its promise made in the 2010-2011 budget. The workers on the factory floor that the member for Flinders and I met in March were scared for their jobs, genuinely concerned for their livelihoods, all because of the Gillard government's actions the week before in its sudden decision to scrap the hot water rebate scheme, despite a commitment in the budget of $24.5 million the previous year for the funding of the scheme. Out of the blue, at 1 minute to 5, 28th of February, the notification came through that yet another commitment had been broken by this government. They gave businesses and homeowners only a few hours to submit their applications in order to remain eligible for the subsidy that the government had promised them. But there was no time for families, no time for businesses to fulfil their orders after that guillotine came down. According to the Clean Energy Council, 1,200 manufacturing jobs and 6,000 installation, sales and administration jobs were at risk. My visit with Greg Hunt was my third visit in recent times to the Rheem Welshpool factory. Mr Deputy Speaker, one of the visits was also with the Leader of the Opposition, Tony Abbott, and I must admit that I was encouraged by the amount of cheer and welcome he got from the workers on the factory floor. The Coalition is a friend of the solar hot water industry in my electorate and across Australia. We spend time talking to the workers and understanding their industry, and we will stand up for them in Parliament. I have over 25 years' experience as a small businessman myself and speak to businesses all over the electorate on a regular basis, and can say that the decisions of the government, the way it handles its brief, is creating almost unprecedented uncertainty in the sector. There has been uncertainty created by the mining tax, uncertainty created by the carbon tax, uncertainty created by the 1% tax cut business that was promised at one stage but denied in the budget, and now there is uncertainty created by the government's scheme management for both businesses and for families in the solar hot water sector, who, lest we forget, are on July the 1st going to be forced to think of ways to reduce their electricity consumption as a result of the carbon tax. The Gillard government has now taken away solar hot water as an option for them for reducing their emissions to pay for the carbon tax that they didn't vote for. Without certainty, there can be no confidence, and businesses and families cannot plan with confidence for the future. One of the points that Rheem Welshpool consistently makes to me is how difficult it is to plan effectively when solar policy and government decisions lurch from one extreme to the other. The solar industry is yet another group that has found out the hard way that you cannot take this government at its word, and that even schemes that go into the budget papers in black and white cannot be believed. During the visit to the factory, we joined with the management and the workers to discuss the issues that they faced. Most of them were concerned about their jobs and felt that they and their families had an uncertain future, and were hopeful that by introducing this bill into Parliament they would be back on track and at least know in what direction they were heading. Talking to businesses around the electorate and also Australia-wide, because I have contacts in many of those businesses, they feel that currently the government is a train wreck waiting to happen. There's no driver, they don't know which stations they're going to stop at, and they're just waiting to hit that brick wall. The other side of the house, you'll hear about their closeness to business. All I'm hearing from business is the opposite. Happy to take any of the government members to any of these businesses to explain to them, and whether they have to wear a bright orange vest or a hard hat, happy to take them out to those places and let them hear what the workers have to say. Mr Deputy Speaker, this bill in essence simply requires the government to keep to the commitment it made in the 2010 and 11 budget and spend the entire amount which it had budgeted for under the solar hot water rebate. In practical terms, this bill would ensure that businesses could continue to operate as planned and homeowners had fairer access to the rebate. Business owners need to be able to plan for the future with confidence, and the private members' bill seeks to provide them with this certainty in this respect. The 2012-13 budget papers clearly show that the money which should have been taken from the forward estimates in the 2011 budget is missing in the 2012 budget. In 2011-12, a total of $88 million was promised, with a total spend in the 2012 budget of $43 million, indicating a $44.7 million cut. The government had always claimed that its reason for terminating the solar hot water rebate early was because the program was oversubscribed, and they anticipated that the funding would be fully expended before its scheduled conclusion. It was amazing just to hear the Parliamentary Secretary saying that the take-up had actually reduced, so if the take-up was reducing, their excuse of being oversubscribed just doesn't gel. The government then promised that the full funding originally allocated for the solar hot water rebate would be retained. However, these figures would suggest otherwise. It would seem that from the figures, the government is sacrificing solar jobs for a paper surplus that most commentators doubt will ever be delivered. As I've mentioned earlier, this also meets a commitment that Greg Hunt and I made to the workers on the factory floor at Rheem, Welshpool on 7th of March, that we would introduce a bill in Parliament to force the government to meet its commitments to the people of Welshpool and the people of Australia. We in the Coalition attempted to have this bill voted on before the budget to try to remedy this situation in the fastest possible way and save as many jobs as possible. However, the government will not have it debated, and shame on them for that. But now, as the Parliamentary Secretary said, he is not going to reinstate the scheme, so I will take that back to the people and the workers at the Rheem factory in Welshpool and my electorate. We have, though, persevered and brought this bill to the Parliament today, and I thank the member for Flinders and other members of the Coalition for the support of the workers in my electorate of Swan. I also acknowledge that the success of this bill would have been dependent on the independents, and hope that they could have seen the damage to the industry and to the families caused by the government's decision and the need to set this right. More broadly speaking, Mr Deputy Speaker, this episode fits into a pattern of behaviour for the Gillard-Rudd Labor era, a pattern of complete mismanagement of simple schemes that ultimately end in wasted money or diminished confidence. In this case, the outcome is at the most serious end of the scale. Australian jobs have been threatened. Again, we heard the Parliamentary Secretary talk about demand-driven schemes, and I guess, or programs, but I guess the pink bats wasn't demand-driven. There is certain déjà vu as we consider this today, as the action of this rebate is a repeat performance of the sudden closure of the Solar Homes and Communities Plan in 2009 by then Minister Garrett, who also presided over the pink bats debacle and was later removed from his post. This joins a list of Labor disasters such as the Home Insulation Program, Cash for Clunkers and Green Loans. In Swan, we also remember the Solar Flagship Scheme in 2010, when none of the WA projects even made the government's short list, despite 8 proposals receiving WA government backing, but the 5 projects that did get up were from Queensland and have progressed. The independents had a choice here to right or wrong, and as the Minister said, he will not reinstate the scheme. As a member for Swan, I will continue to support the workers in the factory of Rheem in Welshpool, and I know the member for Parramatta, who is just about to speak, I'm sure she takes an interest of the workers in her Rheem factory in Rheem as well. So I commend this bill to the House.